right, welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have filmmaker Richard Wong, the director of Hulu's new movie, The Valet, starring Eugenio Derbez and Samara Weaving. Welcome to the show, Richard. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Glad to have you. Well, first of all, I mean, I know that you were kind of like a last-minute addition to the film. Another director dropped out, and you were added. Can you talk about the process of taking on this film?
Yeah, well, Ben O'Dell is, Eugenio and Ben produced a movie under their company, 3PAS, and so I had actually, I was a DP for a long time, so I had actually DP'd a movie for Ben a while back. So yes, it's true. There was other directors. The directors were going to be Bob and Rob, who wrote the script, and they were going to direct the movie because they had also wrote and directed their previous movie, Overboard. So they were all set to do this during the pandemic, or before the pandemic, I should say. And so they actually called me to see if I'd be interested to DP the movie. And then I was like, "Oh, Ben, thanks for asking, but I don't DP anymore. I'm directing now." And he's like, "What? Like, show me your last movie." So I showed him my last movie, which is called Come As You Are. And he really loved it. And I guess it stuck with him because the pandemic shut down the movie. And then, during the pandemic, they had, gotten their stuff together, and the movie had gotten re-greenlit, but they had lost their directors to a TV show. They had sold a TV show, so they were looking for a director. And Ben had thought of me because I think my last film had stuck with them. So they hit me up. I already had a relationship with Lionsgate, and yeah, I gave a presentation about what I thought the movie should be, that was good enough for them. So the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, what was the process like did you at all work with the writers at all to update anything, or would you just go with the script that you had?
I love the script that I read, but I think like any director that, you come in and you have a very specific, idea of what you're doing. And, for me, my whole presentation for the movie was all about my dad. Literally, the whole presentation is about my dad. So, because I just saw Antonio, this character, very much representing my dad, and kind of on a more macro level, the whole family represents my family. So to me, I just approached the movie like I was making a movie about my family and my dad in this, what would happen if my dad was in this particular situation. Interestingly, my grandfather was like, in a sense, like the mayor of Chinatown, unofficially. He was a very popular person in Chinatown, and my dad was this very introverted, invisible guy. So I think in some ways I had experienced what Antonio was going to experience through my dad, growing up in Chinatown in those days. So yeah, I think so when I signed on, like anything else, we didn't have any cast. We only had Eugenio producing the movie. So I didn't get in that late, but I was the last one, I think, above the line in. And so I still got to be a part of all the casting, and I certainly tried my best to put a stamp on a already very good script.
Yeah. I actually just watched the film this morning. I was going to try to watch it yesterday, but I ended up caught up in some other stuff. And I did enjoy it. It's very funny, and also goes in different ways, and I suppose I would come to expect from a romantic comedy, of its nature. So it's good that it kind of twists the expectations.
Yeah. I think we're trying to use people's expectations against them a little bit. I think that was part of the appeal of making the movie, is that, we all grew up on romantic comedies. Annie Hall is amazing. But like, I think, I think all of our goals, Notting Hill, Harry Met Sally, all these things. But I think using that kind of and twisting, we're trying to take every single romantic comedy trope and then twisting it was fun to do.
Yeah. And you're also getting I had Gaz Al-Azraqi on recently, who did Father of the Bride. You're in an era now where different people's stories are able to be told, and you're representing in a certain way the Asian community as a director, which there are more opportunities now for everybody. and different stories, different voices getting out there. And I have to assume that that's probably very rewarding in its own way. The fact that you get to tell the story about, an immigrant coming to this country and his experience, even though you were, ostensibly, I'm assuming you were born here. So
yeah, I'm,
that experience, like you said, with your family, at the least.
Oh, absolutely. I'm, if you follow the movie's kind of, family thing, I'm basically Marco in the movie. I'm basically Antonio's son, and we made Antonio's son a Shakespeare actor very specifically because that's the most visible possible thing you could be. And I think that's the whole idea. Like, that's how I feel about my dad. My dad led this very invisible life, very much so that I could be very visible. So I think that was a theme throughout the whole movie. But yes, I agree with you. Like, I think there's never been a better time. I think it's, I started my career in film 1999 and working as a DIT on network TV shows. And my memory of that time and Asian Americans or people of color working at that time is that's whatever that is. That's 20 plus years ago. Things are radically different today, and I think just kind of being able to see that kind of progress is definitely rewarding.
Yeah. What was the experience? This is your biggest film to date, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? I mean, Mr. Derbez has had a lot of successes, and he's huge here in the States, but also quite literally a megastar in Mexico. What was that experience like? Working with somebody that that renowned.
I think my first film, which is called Colma the Musical, which was made in 2006. I made that movie for $15,000, and I think if I had done this movie after that, I would have not been ready for it at all. But I do think that going down the path of being a DP for 10 years and working with incredible directors, working with incredible DPs and cast and things like that, definitely prepared me for this. So, I think to me, I can't say it was like terribly difficult moving up that way, because I think filmmaking is ultimately filmmaking. Like, if the problems we had on the Valet, with the exact same problems on Come As You Are, which cost $1 million, and that Valet was, obviously, 20 plus times bigger. And so but the filmmaking is still the filmmaking, and the problems you have are still the problems you have. And I still think, my previous Come As You Are, the lead of that film was also the producer, just like Eugenio is the lead and the producer. And I think that was actually great practice in learning how to kind of deal with that. But ultimately, it's just, I think, again, my time as a DP was very helpful, because the collaborative spirit of being a DP and being kind of the right-hand man in my case for the director, I always considered myself a great creative partner to the director when I was a DP. And I think that's what I look for on all aspects of the film, from all the department heads to the actors. Like, we're all creative partners, and I think just under kind of the umbrella of the director, but still, like, we had a very, very collaborative experience. And, obviously he's the top producer of the movie too. So I had nothing but respect for him. And we had an honestly great, amazing experience that was, that I think it wasn't necessarily a trying experience. It was just more like fun. Like, I was like, it was like, I get to work with him. He's a genius. He's brilliant. Like, I can only stand to gain from it. And so that's what it was. I think the converse of it is, work with non-professional actors, and the kind of, and kind of like difficulty of that. I think you can imagine how difficult it is to work with non-actors and trying to find ways to get things out of them. Like, the converse is working with Eugenio, who's the most professional, brilliant comedian. And so in that sense, it's easier.
Yeah, he is particularly so good in this. Just, there's that moment in the beginning of the film where near the beginning of the film where they're before him and Olivia kind of start getting together their plan. Where the other valet is describing how unattractive he is, and they're like kind of saying something and gesturing, and he's just giving these looks, which he's a very talented silent comedic actor in a lot of ways too. He would have been perfect, 100 years ago, before the advent of talkies.
Agree. I totally agree. And I think, I think pretty much every scene in the movie that has no dialogue is a scene that I had added as part of my kind of director's pass of the movie. But and I think largely because of that, his eyes are so expressive. And same with the dramatic things, like the hospital scene is something that I had added. And I just think, with that kind of great, amazing comedic ability, without dialogue, it comes dramatic ability too. He's an amazing dramatic actor. There are a few more dramatic scenes that we end up pulling out of the movie that he's just so incredible in. But I think dramatically he's amazing in the movie too, but largely because he could be so expressive with his face. And I think it's fun to play with that, with the humor of it, but also the dramatic part of it.
Yeah. No, he's a very funny guy. I had the pleasure of talking to him a number of years ago when Instructions Not Included came out.
Yeah.
And that was a throw, because that was one of those movies that took people by surprise on how big it was.
Yeah.
And he's only become bigger since. So, how long did you have to film the whole thing? What was production like?
Production was a little bit tricky because we had to shoot in Atlanta for various reasons, and the movie takes place in LA. So we had a tricky schedule where we we had like 2 months of pre-production, and we shot for a week in LA, and then we had to move the whole company to Atlanta, and then shoot for 37 days in Atlanta, and then we shot 3 more days in LA after that. So it was kind of this tricky kind of back and forth. But with all that said, hopefully nobody can tell that it's Atlanta except for people who live in Atlanta.
I've been to Atlanta. I haven't been to LA. I honestly thought the whole movie was filmed in LA. So
great. Well, great. Then we did.
I don't live in LA, so I don't know it that well. I just know from movie. It looked like movie LA to me. So
yeah. I mean, we shot very key moments in LA to make sure we showed enough LA, especially the movie's a love letter to LA too. So the economics of it all. But that said, I mean, hopefully, the spirit is all intact. But I mean, it was an interesting thing. It's a relatively long script, so we had a lot to do and not a ton of time. But again, when you're surrounded by professionals, it's a dream.
Yeah, you filmed one of the scenes in LA. You filmed in MacArthur Park, right?
Yeah. That's real.
So that was actually in LA. Yeah, okay. That wasn't like a composite thing or anything.
No.
It was a pretty cool scene, a pretty cool shot.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I loved it. I mean, that was like our 3rd day of production, and
nice.
Yeah, it was nice to. Yeah, it's nice to send in early dailies that are that beautiful, and you did a great job on that.
Yeah. For me, the big surprise of the movie was, and somebody I didn't know about, and she sadly passed away, was Carmen Salinas.
Yeah.
She was very funny as Antonio's mother in the movie. And unfortunately, she passed away in December, before the film, was even, I guess, slated to be released.
Yeah.
How was that? Because she seems to be to have been a legendary person in both politically and in creatively in Mexico. What was it like working with her?
Yeah, she's a legend. And she was just amazing. She was as gracious as you could imagine. I say that with no hyperbole. She was the most gracious person you've ever met. And she came on. She was so sweet. She asked me to sign her script because she's had every director sign every script she's ever done, which was like in the hundreds. And she was just so sweet. She was still excited about making things, which I think is a dream for all of us. We're all susceptible to becoming really cynical about what we do. And it's always a dream to not be cynical about it and to still find the joy in what we do, because what we do is, you know, amazing. So like, so to feel that from her, and, you know, it's one of those things where like when she came on set, you know, she was not in great health, as you can imagine. She could barely walk. I think if you watch the movie now, knowing all of that, you can see that we blocked all the scenes where she didn't have to walk very much because she, you know, she needed a helper and all these things. But her spirit was still very youthful, you know, even though she couldn't walk, and, you know, there's a lot of times she had to sleep between takes, you know, and it's amazing because she would like, I just got to rest for 5 seconds, and she just rests, and it's like, okay, you ready? We're gonna roll the camera now. Okay, roll, and then and then she does her thing. And so like, it was very inspiring in that way. There's a great video of her last take in the movie on YouTube. That's you can really see her spirit, and you can see how much everyone loved her on that set. You know, I didn't know her before this, obviously, but Eugenio, you know, Eugenio grew up with her. She was like best friends with his mom. So like in a lot of ways, she was a surrogate mom. So like this was extremely important for Eugenio. That like casting her is 100% Eugenio, and it was very meaningful to them, especially before, you know, they you know, in a lot of ways they knew she was not in great health. So like getting this movie made with them playing, you know, mother and son was extremely meaningful to them, and I think it shows, and it showed on set too, and I think it shows.
Yeah, no, she was quite good. The whole movie was, you know, there's a certain element of film where these type of films, you know, you kind of go in expecting a sickly sweet, you know, pandering kind of almost stupid, you know, film in a lot of ways. And there have certainly been a lot of films in the past that have just done the bare minimum to call it creative, you know what I mean? So going into this and having you know, there's some, you know, kind of cliche things in there, of course, but it's so sweet, and it's at times, you know, real enough to kind of, you know, sweep you along into the magic of it more than anything. And I think when a film doesn't have that spark, that magic, you can't follow along with it. You can tell when somebody's making a film. Of course, I don't think anybody intends to make a crap film whenever a movie is crap, but you can tell when something just never worked. You know, it never clicks. There's nothing about, maybe a person or two stand out, you know, because they were exceptional. But, you know, it's nice to have a movie where that magic is apparent on screen, where things do click and everybody seems happy to be there and happy to be making something together. And I think the Valet is definitely indicative of that. It wasn't really a question, but I was just kind of giving you a little bit of applause.
Oh, thanks.
For roping it all together.
I do I appreciate that, and I do think that there was quite a lot of love that went into that movie. You know, we were having fun with a lot of things. We're having, like you say, like we're having fun with all the cliches. We're leaning into them because you can't avoid them when you're making in a way you can't avoid them. So you might as well lean into them, make fun of them, like make fun of them lovingly. Like I think, you know, along with, you know, the playing of tropes of romantic comedies, we're kind of playing with the tropes of Hollywood and the tropes of movies in general. I had the best time doing those movies within the movies, you know, like the Earhart and the Diner and the Maud. You know, those three things, like, I mean, there's a lot of love of cinema in all of that. And I think, you know, I think it's fun to kind of turn those tropes and those cliches on its head, and have fun with them and like embrace them, because they're there for a reason. Like the reason why they're cliches is because people love them, really, you know, and they work on some level. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I hopefully people can, you know, can kind of see it for more than just a dumb, like it was very, I will just candidly say it was very much our aim for it not to be a dumb romantic comedy. We didn't want it to be too mindless. It's got to be digestible too, you know. And it's a fine line to ride, but hopefully we wrote it well enough.
Yeah, well, there's also, I don't know why this scene is sticking with me with the scene where they go to Dunkin' Donuts and they all divvy up the order, and they're arguing about the order, and Antonio's asking for all the ketchup they possibly could give.
Yeah.
And all that, and then the scene in any other movie it could just be easily thrown out, but for some reason there's something about it that's, again, I'm using this word in a weird way, magical. It's a simple scene. It doesn't really have anything necessarily to connect to anything else in the film, but it's just about these people and what they would normally do. And I think that's what when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a filmmaker in some way. And I had an idea for a movie starring Christian Slater and Kiefer Sutherland where they played cops, but didn't do any actual investigative work. They basically just went to go get lunch, talk about everything besides their work as cops. And I don't know what, but I never really, took it very far. So
sounds good.
It's out there. If you want to make that movie, go ahead.
Especially Christian Slater and Kiefer Sutherland, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, because this was back in the times when they were like the hot young thing. So I just thought it would be a great idea of them doing anything but their jobs. So I think that's why that scene spoke to me so much.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think character-driven stuff's amazing. It's something that, American cinema hasn't embraced totally. But like, yeah, I mean, it's something that I guess, in a sense, is a remake of a French film. My last film was also a remake of a Belgian film. So, character-driven movies are much more embraced in Europe. So maybe there's something to that. But I agree. Like, I think if you can, as a filmmaker, I think if you can get the audience to just really buy the characters and love the characters that like early enough, then I think you can get away with all kinds of stuff. Because I think the Valet is tricky because tonally it has to ride a lot of different lines tonally, which is, honestly my favorite challenge in movie making. It's just like, just trying to, there's parts of the movie that are extremely goofy, and then there's some stuff that's really serious too. So I think when you can get people to really believe those characters and really love those characters, and I think you do that by having character moments like that, then you can get away with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully you do anyway.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple more questions for you, and one just kind of spurred by my own admission about, being a youngster and, writing things. What was your pathway to wanting to become a filmmaker?
I was similar to you. I mean, I grew up watching movies. I grew up watching a lot of movies all the time, and so I just grew up with this real love of that. I also grew up with this love of photography, so very much related to that. And I was really bad in school. I was terrible at school. I also just barely went to school, but I did have a class. I like economics class in my senior year, and I was barely graduating from high school. But I had this economics class, and for the project, they let me do a video, and this is 1994, so video was a little harder to do back then. But so I did this video, and I just like had the best time, and it was one of those moments where it's like, oh, learning is fun, maybe. So like, so when it came to graduating from high school, I did graduate. I wasn't that bad, but
right.
When I graduated from high school and I went to community college, I saw that there was film classes. So having had that experience in doing that video, I was like, I should just take a bunch of film classes, see how it is. Yeah. And then it was pretty immediate where I was like, whoa, like suddenly I'm getting A's because I actually care about this and I actually like this, So I went to film school for a while, but I didn't graduate because I started working at a camera rental house in San Francisco here. I was actually like trying to get on real sets as much as I can. So I was similar to high school. I was the same way in college. I didn't necessarily go all the time. I went kind of when I wanted to, but I still got A's because my final projects were always good enough to get A's. That's what I learned in film school, is that you don't have to go all the time. You just need to have a good final project. So anyway, but I also didn't care about graduating that much. And I never did graduate because I just didn't think the degree mattered that much in film, which it doesn't, to be honest. So I started working as a PA, and then like I was, meeting people, and then they recommended me people started recommending me around town for and at this rental house. They hired me to to be a part of the rental house, and my very first day there was their first HD camera came that day. So there was something cosmic about that, because I ended up learning all about video engineering, what's now called DIT. But in those days, you did live color. It was like paint. It was like paint. It was like Photoshop Live, you know.
Okay.
So I learned all about color theory, all about doing that. And again, and at the time, HD was starting to take over TV in Hollywood. So they started to need, you know, video engineers, what's called DITs now. So I was the 6th DIT in the union, and I ended up migrating from here to LA and just working on network TV shows for like the next 7 years. And then when it was amazing, because back then, because the DIT did color live, and I had the best and biggest monitors before LCD monitors. So I had the best monitor. The director would sit with me and the DP. So it was just the most amazing secondary film school, sitting with directors, sitting with DPs, just watching, but having a creative input because I was doing color. And then I was working on Arrested Development season 2, and like the really novel thing about Arrested Development in that time, and especially novel for me because I worked on virtually all Fox shows basically. But on Arrested, they would hire a lot of indie film directors, which again was somewhat novel at the time, like the Russo brothers, like Patty Jenkins, Chandrasekhar, all these people who were really interesting. And because I sat next to them, I would talk to them a little bit, and I realized at some point that they just made a movie at some point. They had to go make a movie, and that's how they took the next step. So after season 2, I was like, you know what I got to do is I got to go make a movie. So, you know, I had worked 7 years straight, so I had some money, but I like put aside $15,000, which is not a lot of money, but I didn't want to spend. I'm a little cheap. I was like, I had run into an old film school friend of mine, and during film school, all we talked about was like musicals and Jurassic Park. So like all we talked about was big, gigantic action movies, which is another love of mine, and musicals. And, you know, we couldn't go make a big action movie with $15,000, but we could make a musical. So he and I that summer set out to make this musical, and that ended up being Colma the Musical, which ended up having its own kind of brand of success. It got nominated for the Spirit Award, and it got picked up by Lionsgate, and it changed our life. It ended my DIT career, but all this happened in 2007. And 2008 there was a strike. And so I was a director at that moment, though not ready for anything for sure. But I had my reps and everything. But when 2008 came around, there was a strike, everything shut down. So Wayne Wang had seen my film, and he's like, "Hey, I've got a movie during the strike. If you wanna, do you want to come DP for me? You could just kind of hang, you know, we'll just work together for a while." So I ended up DPing like 3 movies for Wayne, who's become this great mentor of mine and a father figure. And that kind of led me down this DP path, which was, you know, if DIT was this great secondary film school, I would say that DP was kind of a third film school where I worked under great directors, learned a lot about everything. And I think that's really what prepared me to make a leap from Come As You Are to the Valet. But then after, you know, 7 or so years of DPing, I was like, oh, you know, I'd forgotten. I kind of wanted to be a director. So that was perfectly happy being a DP, but then I started to get that itch again. So I started just looking for something, and then and Come As You Are in a lot of ways fell in my lap, very luckily, cosmically. And so when I directed that movie, and then it had its own kind of, just like Colma, had its own kind of brand of success, that was the end of my DP career, and that led straight to the Valet.
That's great. No, that's great. And I saw on IMDb, the pro side, that you've got a couple of movies that your name is attached to. Are you working on anything specifically right now? Are you at any stage of development or pre-production on anything?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny. Like Wayne had always told me that you need 20 to get 1 to go. So it is essentially, you know, attaching myself to 20 things. But that said, yeah, I'm after the Valet. You know, I think there's essentially 2 things. There's like, you know, get on something bigger, continue to rise, you know, get on something even bigger, and then there are these very specific personal indie Asian American film projects that it was like 4 of them that I really want to do, 3 of which, you know, I had a part in the writing. So I think between those two things, and there's like a TV show that I really want to do that I probably will do. And so like, yeah, I think ultimately after the Valet, I think mostly it's about being really picky, about making sure my next film is just the right film. And I think it can go two ways: either do something much bigger, or if it's going to be smaller, be something really personal. And so besides, I was on the road for a year and a half. I live in San Francisco. I don't live in LA, but I was on the road for a year and a half, and COVID was difficult. You know, like family can't visit you and all that stuff. So short of taking the summer off, which I'm doing, I'm currently taking the summer off, which I'm enjoying. Yeah, I'm kind of fielding what I should do next. I think the Valet has certainly opened doors and a fair amount of options, but I'm hesitant to commit to any of them at this very moment. I'll just say, yeah, I'm very careful.
Do you kind of wish, like I think about certain film directors still work this way, but there was a time, and it was true with most artists, I think. Like you think about David Bowie's career in the 70s, he put an album or two out a year.
Yeah.
Directors like Walter Hill that would put out a movie every year. Do you wish that things could kind of be move that quickly, you know, and just you wouldn't have to worry about if one doesn't do well, you're already on to the next one, and maybe that'll be a thing? Or do you feel like this is the modern age where artists are now little, like you said, picky about what you do next? Is it more, I don't know how to say this exactly. Is it more out of a personal thing to make the right choice, or is it just about not needing to, you know, burn life at both ends? You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting
going on.
It's an interesting point. There are definitely friends of mine who work nonstop, and then there's people like me, current me. I think there's a version of me that also works nonstop, but it kind of just depends. Like, again, like for me, would I have loved to go straight on to another movie? Because there's a version where you don't, like on the Valet, I was on the Valet to the very bitter end, like all the way through. But there are directors who don't even go to the edit. Like they have their editor editing, they're in pre-production on another movie, they watch cuts at night, they send their notes. You know, that's a version of a career, you know.
Right.
Totally cool, because they have so many things they want to do that they have to do it that way. Like I'm not quite that way. I'm a workaholic, but not that much of a workaholic. And I actually don't think I'm a workaholic at all. Actually, I think I'm relatively lazy. But that said, I think, you know, I also very much want balance, and I think I'm not somebody who necessarily needs to jump onto something back. I think if I jumped on something right after the Valet, I think I'd have been miserable. You know, like I need a certain amount of reset. I need a certain amount of balance in my life, and my family certainly gives me that. I mean, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and, you know, I was gone for a year and a half. So it's, you know, that's quite a lot of her life, actually, percentage-wise, if you think about it. So, yeah, so, you know, I think being home for the summer and kind of resetting is my thing, but I don't think there's anything like, yeah, I know people who, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily because of today, but like, certainly today it's easier to do what you're talking about. You can go from film to film to film. Like my editor on the Valet, Sandra, who's wonderful. We were talking about the exact same, because I was like, you know, because she was like, wow, oh, you know, when I walked into the editing office the first day, they're like, oh, here's your office. I was like, why do I need an office? I'm going to be in the editing room the whole day, right? They're like, oh, well, directors don't want to be in the editing room. They want to be working on their next thing. They want to be writing. They want to be whatever it is, you know, because every director is so different. So, and it's just like you said, there's no right way to do it. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. So I think for me, like, I was reading a lot of scripts during post-production of the Valet, because the Valet had already had, I think, a fair amount of buzz. And so there was a bunch of, you know, relatively big projects that I was reading and meeting for. But I think when I was reading them, all I could think about was like, oh God, this sounds exhausting. Like just like this, like I can't imagine doing this right now. And I think that's just a mental thing for me. Like I was exhausted, you know.
Yeah.
I think for some people, they want to be on set all the time, whereas I really try to moderate a little bit, because it takes a lot out of you. I was on the Valet for a year and a half. It takes a lot. It just takes a lot out of you. It took a lot out of me anyway. So I want to be desperate again. So I take the time off helps me become desperate again.
Yeah. Well, there was also a thing too where a lot of independent directors make that one film that gets a big splash, and then they get sucked into Hollywood. And I'm not going to name any names, but people have made grand, expensive, big box office films that I personally think could have funded, you know, probably about 300 other smaller films that would have been much better. Right. You know, any one of them would have been much better than the enormous turd that, you know, ended up on screen. And I think it takes away from those people's careers in a lot of way, because then they're just stuck probably doing Hollywood films, because going back, just at some point they just get into a position where you can't go back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, I think Wayne talked to me about that a lot, because Wayne's career, you know, went from doing little indies. He did this, you know, incredible indie called Chen is Missing, which you know, played Lincoln Center for like a year and a half and had this huge impact, especially on Asian America. But then, you know, if you cut to 10, 15 years later, he was doing like Made in Manhattan and Last Holiday, big movies. And, you know, I think, you know, he would always talk to me about, you know, the dangers of being pigeonholed. And, you know, because I think pigeonholed is a loaded way to put it, because I think that's a perfectly happy career, making millions of dollars. Right. And that there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, you have to also be creatively happy. So I think finding that particular balance is always tricky. But I think it takes also the ability to say no to things and have a little confidence that your career is not over, you know, because I do think there's you know, I think on my own part too, like there's a tendency to want to just jump into something right away, because you're like, I got to use this window, you know, the window's a real thing. But yeah, at the same time, it could also send your career into a place you didn't want to. So that's why I want to be really careful what I do next. But also, just, I don't know how I would do if I wasn't passionate about it. Like, I was extremely passionate about the Valet, you know. I just want to make sure I have some of that going in, because can you imagine spending two years on something and you don't have enough you only have enough passion to last 3 months, and then the rest of it's miserable. I don't want to be miserable.
Yeah, well, I think also, you know, with any creative person, fear often is the motivating emotion. Fear of success, fear of not success, you know, fear of looking foolish, fear of looking like a hack, you know, or, you know, that all those things kind of, you know, I can see fear being just an instinctual thing where, like, it will oftentimes push people to do good or bad things depending on where you're at in that moment, I suppose.
No, there's a fear of commitment thing too, because it's like a tattoo. Although you can remove tattoos, but like, you know what they say, you know, pain is temporary, but film is forever. And like, film is forever. Your name is gonna be on that thing forever. You know, like if you make something pretty bad, or something that doesn't age well, or anything like that, you know, that's your name's attached to that forever. So, you know, I can see how that can create a lot of fear. But again, then it becomes, you have to have enough confidence in yourself that you can make it something good.
Well, I'll let you off with an easy final question. What was the last movie you watched on your summer vacation?
I guess it was Top Gun.
The original?
No, the new Top Gun.
Okay.
Yeah. It was interesting. Like, I had a pretty bad theater experience where I happened to, me and my buddy, we always go see movies together. And, you know, being old men now, we always go like at 11 a.m. And, you know, it's always us and a few other, you know, 60-year-olds. And we have a wonderful, awesome adult time at the movies. But so we went the other day, and it was, what we found out later was that it was the last day of school. So we were there with some other, you know, fine people, and then like 30 16-year-olds walk in during the trailers, right? Now, I'm not, you know, I'm not anti-16-year-old. That's awesome. So they walked in, and my buddy, to be fair, my buddy was like, oh God, like maybe we should leave. I was like, nah, dude, like it's fine. Like I always sit in the last row because I stay like, so we're in the last row. There's nobody behind us at all. And then they come in and I'm like, let them talk, let them have a great time. It's their last day of school. It's all good. And so the movie starts, they're talking and he's getting mad. I'm just like, it's fine, dude. Like, just let him have, we're in the back. It's okay. It's Top Gun. It's super loud. We can hear what's going on. But then they start getting out of their seats and start playing tag. They start running around the theater. So anyway, needless to say, I could go on, but it turned out to be a relatively stressful experience. A bit of words were exchanged, etc. But I will say this about Top Gun, the new Top Gun, is that with all that going on, I still love the movie. I think that says a lot about that movie, considering how bad that theater experience was. The movie was good enough to survive that, and so that's about the highest praise I can give it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Richard, I really thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm glad that the Valet is doing well. I wish you luck on whatever project you land on next, and hopefully in the future we'll get to talk again.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. It's been great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.